At the gala, my husband laughed to the investor. My wife, she delivers meal kits in an old van, an embarrassment to our image. What Douglas didn't know was that in the next 30 seconds, his entire world would collapse around him like a house of cards in a hurricane.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
I stood 3 feet away, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't sipped, wearing a dress I'd bought at a thrift store because Douglas controlled our bank accounts and gave me an allowance of $200 a month. The dress was navy blue, simple, probably cost $40 originally. Douglas had looked at me when I came downstairs and said, "Well, at least you're not wearing your delivery uniform." The investor's name was Thomas Whitfield, 70 years old, silver hair, eyes that had seen everything twice. He was worth $2.3 billion according to Forbes, and Douglas had been trying to get a meeting with him for 2 years. Tonight, at the Chicago Children's Hospital Charity Gala, he'd finally cornered him near the bar. I watched my husband perform. He did it so well. The confident handshake, the self-deprecating laugh, the casual mention of his executive background that conveniently left out the part where he'd been fired 8 years ago and hadn't worked since. Douglas was a professional at being impressive to people who didn't know him. "My wife delivers meal kits," Douglas said, gesturing toward me like I was a piece of furniture he was apologizing for. "She insisted on coming tonight. I told her it wasn't really her scene, but you know women." He laughed. Thomas didn't. "Meal kits," Thomas repeated. His voice was neutral. "Some little startup. She drives around in this ancient van dropping off boxes of vegetables to people who can't be bothered to grocery shop. It's humiliating, honestly. I keep telling her to quit, but she says it gives her purpose." Douglas made air quotes. "I think she just likes having an excuse to avoid the house." I set my champagne glass down on a passing waiter's tray. My hands weren't shaking. They should have been, but they weren't. I'd waited too long for this moment to be nervous. Thomas's phone rang. Not the phone he'd been using all evening. The one his assistant answered. This was a different phone, smaller, black. He pulled it from his inside jacket pocket and looked at the screen. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Excuse me," he said to Douglas. "I need to take this." He stepped away. Not far. Maybe 10 feet. I could see his face as he listened. I watched the color drain from his cheeks. I watched him turn and look directly at me. Not at Douglas. At me. He hung up slowly. Walked back to where Douglas was still holding his scotch, still wearing his salesman's smile. Thomas leaned close. Whispered something in Douglas's ear. The smile died. The scotch glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. And Douglas looked at me with a terror I had never seen in 23 years of marriage. "Brenda," he said, just my name, like he'd never said it before. I didn't move. Thomas straightened his jacket. "Collins, I believe you just called my daughter an embarrassment." "My daughter, who founded and owns the company you've been asking me to invest in for the past 2 years. My daughter, who is worth approximately $120 million. My daughter, who I've been trying to give this to for the past decade." He held up an envelope, cream-colored, heavy paper. "What?" Douglas couldn't finish. "It's an invitation," Thomas said, "to join the Whitfield Holdings board. I was going to give it to her tonight. Surprise her. Her company has done $340 million in revenue this year. She built it from nothing in my test kitchen 10 years ago, when I first met her. When she found me through a DNA test and asked me for nothing except a chance to prove herself." Douglas looked at me. "You're his daughter?" "Yes." "You own a company worth $120 million at last valuation, probably more now. And you've been delivering meal kits in a van?" "Because I like to know how my business works, from the ground up, because I believe the CEO should understand every job in the company. Because I wanted to see if anyone would recognize me." I paused. They never did, including you. The people around us had stopped talking. The shattering glass had attracted attention. Now a circle was forming, watching the scene unfold like a play they hadn't bought tickets for. "I don't understand," Douglas said. His voice was weak. We've been married for 23 years. How could you hide something like this? The same way you hid your gambling problem from your first wife. The same way you hid your affair with your secretary in 2019. The same way you hid the fact that you weren't fired from Morrison and Associates. You were terminated for sexual harassment and signed an NDA to keep it quiet. I tilted my head. Did you think I didn't know, Douglas? Did you think I was too stupid to notice? His face went gray. Brenda, my name was on the NDA payout, by the way. You needed my signature for the joint account withdrawal. I signed it. I just didn't say anything. I looked at Thomas. That's when I decided. That's when I knew I needed to build something he couldn't touch. Thomas nodded slowly. And you did. I did. Douglas grabbed my arm. We need to talk about this. In private. Right now. I looked down at his hand, at the fingers digging into my skin through the cheap navy dress. Take your hand off me. Brenda, please, take your hand. Off me. He let go, stepped back. The circle of watchers had grown. I recognized some of them. The Hendersons from Douglas's golf club. The Martins, who had us over for dinner twice a year. People who had smiled at me for 2 decades while thinking I was nothing. Just Douglas Collins's mousy wife who drove an old van and couldn't afford nice clothes. I'm going to say this once, I said quietly. So listen carefully. For 23 years, you have controlled every aspect of my life. You gave me an allowance like I was a child. You criticized my clothes, my hair, my weight, my decisions. You told me I was lucky to have you because no one else would want me. You spent $320,000 at online casinos in the last 3 years while telling me we couldn't afford to fix the dishwasher. You made me feel invisible, worthless, less than nothing. I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear me. And the whole time, I was building an empire. Every morning when you thought I was delivering meal kits because I was too pathetic to do anything else, I was running a company with 400 employees and operations in 12 states. Every night when you thought I was watching television because I had nothing interesting to say, I was on conference calls with investors and reading quarterly reports. You never noticed because you never looked at me. Not really. I was just background noise in your life. The wife you kept around because divorce would be inconvenient. I stepped back, raised my voice so everyone could hear. I want a divorce, Douglas. My lawyer will contact yours in the morning. I suggest you find a good one. You're going to need it. I turned to Thomas. Thank you for the invitation. I'd be honored to join the board. The honor is mine, he said. Shall I have my driver take you home? I have my van parked outside. The old one Douglas is so embarrassed by. I think I'll drive myself. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high. Behind me, I heard Douglas calling my name. I heard the murmur of the crowd, the whispered speculation, the barely contained excitement of people witnessing a scandal unfold. I didn't turn around. The valet looked confused when I handed him my ticket. The white van? Ma'am, are you sure? I'm sure. He brought it around. A 2012 Ford Transit with 180,000 miles on it and a dent in the rear bumper from when a delivery driver backed into me in a parking lot. The words, Fresh Start Meal Kits, were painted on the side in green letters I'd chosen myself 10 years ago. I climbed in, started the engine. And as I pulled away from the Chicago Four Seasons Hotel, I finally let myself smile. The phone call Thomas received had been from Chef Antoine Rousseau, my business partner and closest friend. I'd asked him to call at exactly 8:47 p.m. with the news that Thomas's daughter needed him. We'd rehearsed it 3 times. The timing had to be perfect, because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a spontaneous revelation. This was a plan I'd been building for 3 years, ever since I found the NDA paperwork and realized I'd married a stranger. Douglas thought he was humiliating me tonight. He thought he was showing Thomas Whitfield what a successful man he was despite his embarrassing wife. He had no idea he was walking into a trap I'd spent 1,000 days constructing. I drove through the Chicago streets, past the glittering lights of downtown, past the neighborhoods where people were just sitting down to dinner or putting their kids to bed. Normal people living normal lives. I'd wanted that once. A normal life. A husband who loved me. Children we never had because Douglas said he wasn't ready, and then got a vasectomy without telling me. I'd given him everything. My 20s, my 30s, my 40s. Half of my 50s. 23 years of being told I wasn't enough, would never be enough, should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he threw my way. No more. I pulled into the driveway of our house, the house I'd be keeping according to the prenup Douglas had insisted on, never realizing it would protect my assets instead of his. The lights were off. The neighbors' houses were dark. Just me and the silence and the beginning of a new life. I sat in the van for a long time, thinking about everything that would come next, the lawyers, the discovery process, the moment Douglas would realize just how badly he'd underestimated me. My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. "I'm proud of you. Always have been. Dad." I stared at that word. I was 58 years old, and I'd only known my father for 10 years. My mother had died when I was 42, taking the secret of my parentage with her. Or so she thought. I'd found a letter in her things, an address, a name, Thomas Whitfield. I'd shown up at his office unannounced, no appointment, no connections, just a DNA test result and a lifetime of questions. He'd looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I wondered if you'd ever come." He'd offered me money. I said no. He'd offered me a job at one of his companies. I said no. I asked for one thing, access to his commercial kitchen facility after hours, so I could test recipes. I had an idea for a business. I just needed space to develop it. He gave me that. And for 10 years, he watched me build Fresh Start meal kits from nothing into one of the fastest-growing food delivery companies in the Midwest. He never invested directly. I wouldn't let him. He never gave me special treatment. He just watched and waited. And when I was ready, he was there. Tonight was the night I was ready. I got out of the van, walked into the empty house, poured myself a glass of wine from the bottle I'd been saving for this occasion, a 2015 Chateau Margaux that cost more than Douglas's monthly golf membership. He'd never noticed it in the wine rack. He never noticed anything about me. I sat at the kitchen table and drank that wine slowly, thinking about tomorrow, about the lawyers, about the look on Douglas's face when he realized his wife wasn't just rich. She was richer than he'd ever dreamed of being. At midnight, headlights swept across the window, Douglas's car. The Mercedes he'd leased because he said it was important for his image, even though we couldn't afford the payments. I heard the garage door open, heard him stumble inside, heard the clatter of keys being thrown on the counter. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. His bow tie was undone. His eyes were red. He'd been drinking since I left. "We need to talk," he said. "We don't. Brenda, please." I didn't know. How could I have known? You never told me. I never told you because you never asked. In 23 years, Douglas, have you ever once asked me about my day? About what I was thinking? About what I wanted? Have you ever looked at me and seen anything other than someone who existed to make your life more comfortable? He opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't answer. That's what I thought. I finished my wine, set the glass in the sink, walked past him toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" he called after me. "To bed. In the guest room. Your things will be packed by tomorrow afternoon. My lawyer will be in touch." "You can't just... This is my house, too." I stopped, turned. "Actually, it's not. Read the prenup, Douglas. The one you insisted on because you were worried I might take you for everything you had. It protects premarital assets and any assets acquired through individual effort during the marriage. This house was purchased with money from my company. My company, which you never knew about because you never cared enough to look. So no, this isn't your house. It's mine, and you have 72 hours to get out." I walked upstairs, closed the guest room door, lay down on the bed I'd been sleeping in for 3 years anyway, because Douglas snored and complained when I moved too much. And eventually, it was just easier to sleep alone. In the darkness, I let myself feel it, the anger, the grief, The strange, hollow victory of finally being seen for who I was, even if it took destroying everything to get there. Tomorrow would be hard. The weeks after would be harder. There would be lawyers and depositions and Douglas's inevitable attempts to claim what wasn't his. There would be media attention when the story got out. The meal kit mogul whose husband didn't know she was a millionaire. There would be people who would say, I should have told him, should have given him a chance, should have been a better wife. But tonight I didn't have to think about any of that. Tonight I just had to lie here in the dark and remember the look on his face, the terror, the disbelief, the dawning realization that the woman he'd dismissed as worthless was worth more than he could ever comprehend. That look would keep me warm for a very long time. Douglas didn't leave in 72 hours. He hired a lawyer instead. The paperwork arrived on day 4. A petition claiming I had fraudulently concealed marital assets and demanding full disclosure of my financial holdings. Douglas was seeking half of everything, plus the house, plus alimony. His lawyer was Gerald Finch, a downtown shark known for aggressive tactics and winning at any cost. I read the petition at my kitchen table, drinking coffee from a mug that said "World's Okayest Delivery Driver." Antoine had given it to me as a joke 3 years ago. Now it seemed prophetic. He actually thinks he can win this, I said into the phone. Antoine was on the other end, probably in his kitchen preparing for the lunch rush at Maison Rousseau, the restaurant he ran when he wasn't helping me build an empire. He thinks you're the same woman you were 20 years ago. The one who would have been too scared to fight back. I was never that woman. He just assumed I was. Assumption is the mother of all failures, mon ami. What does Thomas say? He's meeting me for lunch. He wants to introduce me to someone. The lawyer he mentioned? Probably. He's been vetting candidates for weeks. I hung up and got ready. Not in the thrift store dress this time. In a charcoal Armani suit I'd bought 3 months ago, tailored to fit perfectly, hanging in the back of my closet for exactly this moment. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see Douglas's invisible wife. I saw Brenda Collins, CEO of Fresh Start Meal Kits. A woman worth $120 million. A woman who was done hiding. Thomas was waiting at a corner table in the Capitol Grill, his preferred spot for business meetings. Across from him sat a woman I recognized from the Forbes profile I'd read last month. Lillian Chen, Harvard Law, former federal prosecutor, now the most feared divorce attorney in Illinois. Brenda, Thomas stood to greet me. This is Lillian Collins. Lillian didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her reputation preceded her. Your father has told me about your situation. I've reviewed the petition Mr. Collins filed. It's aggressive, but fundamentally flawed. I sat down. How so? He's claiming concealment of marital assets. But your assets weren't concealed. They were separately owned. You filed taxes independently. Your company is structured as a single-member LLC that predates your marriage. You never commingled funds, never used marital money to invest, never added his name to any accounts or documents. The prenuptial agreement he insisted on specifically protects assets acquired through individual effort. She paused. He built the cage that's now trapping him. So he has no claim? None. But he's going to fight anyway. Men like Douglas always do. They can't accept that they miscalculated. Thomas leaned forward. Tell her about the other thing. Lillian pulled a folder from her briefcase, slid it across the table. During my preliminary research, I discovered some discrepancies in your husband's employment history. He told you he was fired from Morrison & Associates 8 years ago due to corporate restructuring. He told the gala guests he had an executive background. Neither is accurate. I opened the folder. Inside, HR documents, email printouts, a settlement agreement. I started reading. He was terminated for sexual harassment, I said. I knew that. I saw the NDA. You saw the sanitized version. This is the full complaint. Lillian pointed to a page. 3 women, repeated incidents over 4 years. 1 attempted assault that was covered up when the victim was paid $400,000 to leave the company. Douglas wasn't just a harasser, he was a predator. And Morrison paid to make it disappear. My stomach turned. I'd known about the harassment. I hadn't known the extent. Hadn't known about the assault. Hadn't known about the victims who'd been silenced. How did you get this? I have contacts. The NDA expired 2 years ago when Morrison was acquired by a larger firm. The records became accessible through legal channels. Why wasn't this reported? Why wasn't he charged? Because powerful men protect other powerful men. And because the victims were paid enough to walk away. Lillian's voice was flat. It's the oldest story in corporate America. I closed the folder, pushed it back across the table. What do we do with this? That's your decision. We can use it to pressure him into a quiet settlement, sign the divorce papers, walk away with nothing, or this becomes public. Or we can expose him regardless, as a matter of principle. She paused. There are arguments for both approaches. And the victims? I've reached out to 2 of them. They're considering whether to go public. One has agreed to speak with you if you'd like. I thought about Douglas sleeping in our guest room for the past 4 nights, calling me unreasonable and emotional and vindictive. I thought about the way he'd laughed at the gala, calling me an embarrassment. I thought about 23 years of being dismissed, diminished, made to feel like nothing. I want to meet her, I said, the victim. I want to hear her story. Thomas nodded slowly. I thought you might say that. The meeting happened 3 days later. A quiet cafe on the north side. The woman's name was Rachel Torres. She was 42 now, a marketing director at a nonprofit. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm, but her eyes were guarded. Thank you for meeting me, I said. Your lawyer said you're divorcing him. Yes. Good. She sat down, ordered tea, waited until the server left before speaking again. I was 26 when it happened. My first real job out of grad school. Douglas was my supervisor's supervisor. He seemed so charming at first. Everyone said how lucky I was to get his attention. I listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't defend. Just listened. It started with comments, then touching. Then one night after a conference, he followed me to my hotel room. I said no. He didn't stop. Her voice was steady now, practiced from years of therapy. When I reported it, HR asked what I was wearing, what I'd been drinking, whether I'd led him on. They offered me 6 months' salary to sign the NDA and leave. I'm sorry, I said. It wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough. I took the money, paid off my student loans, started over at a different company in a different city, tried to forget. She looked at me directly. I thought about you sometimes. I knew he was married. I wondered if you knew what he was. I didn't. Not really. I suspected things, affairs, lies, but I didn't know about this. Would it have mattered? The question hung in the air. I thought about it honestly, about who I was 20 years ago, before I found Thomas, before I built Fresh Start, before I learned to see myself as someone with power. I don't know, I admitted. I want to say yes, but I was so deep in his version of reality that I might have found a way to excuse it, to believe his excuses. That's what bothers me most. Not that he did these things, but that I might have let him. Rachel nodded slowly. That's honest. Most people wouldn't admit that. I'm done with dishonesty. With myself and with everyone else? Then let me be honest with you. She leaned forward. I don't care about your divorce. I don't care about your money or your company or your revenge. But if there's a way to make sure he can never do this to anyone else, if there's a way to make his name mean something other than powerful man who gets away with everything, then I want to be part of that. I reached across the table, took her hand. There is. And I want you to be part of it too. We talked for 2 more hours. About what she'd been through, about what I was planning, about the other 2 victims. One who had moved to Canada and wanted nothing to do with the case. One who had died by suicide 4 years after the assault. Her name was Michelle. She was 23 when Douglas attacked her. She left a note that mentioned him by name. Her family sued Morrison. The case was settled out of court. The records were sealed. I drove home in a daze. Sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the house I'd shared with a man I'd never really known. A man who had destroyed lives while I made him dinner and ironed his shirts and believed his lies. Douglas was in the living room when I walked in, watching television, like nothing had changed. Where were you? He asked, not concerned, annoyed. Meeting with someone? Your lawyer? Gerald says your lawyer is being difficult. He thinks we can settle this if you'd just be reasonable. I met with Rachel Torres today. He went still. The remote control froze in his hand. Who? You know who. One of the women you assaulted at Morrison. I didn't assault anyone. That's a complete fabrication. I've seen the files, Douglas. The real files. Not the sanitized version you showed HR. The actual complaints. The settlement documents. The security footage from the hotel hallway. His face went pale. That footage was destroyed. It was copied. By a security guard who felt guilty about what Morrison did. He's been holding on to it for 8 years, waiting for someone to care. I walked past him toward the stairs. Your lawyer is going to receive a discovery request tomorrow for all documents related to your termination from Morrison. And when he sees what's in those documents, he's going to advise you to settle, quickly, quietly, before this becomes the story everyone's talking about. Brenda, you can't. I can. I will. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. I climbed the stairs. Heard him scrambling behind me. Heard him on the phone with Gerald, his voice high and panicked, saying words like extortion and defamation and she's lost her mind. But underneath the panic, I heard something else. Fear. Real fear. The fear of a man who had spent his whole life avoiding consequences, finally realizing they had caught up to him. I went to the guest room, locked the door, and called Lillian. It's done, I said. He knows we have the files. Good. Now we wait. How long? 2 days. Maybe 3. He'll try to threaten, then negotiate, then capitulate. They always follow the same pattern. And Rachel? She's ready. If he doesn't settle by Friday, she goes public. 2 other women have agreed to corroborate. The Morrison cover-up becomes national news, and Douglas becomes the face of corporate sexual assault. I closed my eyes, thought about Michelle, 23 years old, a whole life ahead of her, gone. Do it, I said. Even if he settles, do it anyway. That wasn't the original plan. Plans change. Those women deserve justice, not just leverage. Silence on the line. Then Lillian's voice, softer than before. I'll make some calls. We'll need to coordinate with a journalist who can tell the story responsibly. I know one. From the Tribune. She interviewed me last year for a piece on women entrepreneurs. She's good. Careful. She'll do it right. Send me her contact information. I did. Then I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I'd spent in this house with a monster. All the dinners. All the conversations, all the times he'd touched me, and I hadn't known where those hands had been, what they'd done. I should have felt sick. I did feel sick. But underneath the nausea, underneath the rage and the grief and the horror, there was something else. Clarity. For the first time in 23 years, I knew exactly who Douglas Collins was. And I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. The story would break in a week. Douglas would be ruined. And I would finally be free, not just of him, of the version of myself who had accepted less than she deserved, who had believed his lies because the truth was too painful, who had hidden in an old van because she didn't think she was worthy of being seen. That woman was gone now. The woman who remained was ready to fight. Pamela showed up on day 6, Douglas's sister, 55 years old, blonde hair that was too blonde, nails that were too long, a smile that never reached her eyes. She drove a white Lexus SUV that Douglas had co-signed for, and she walked into my house like she owned it. Brenda, she didn't hug me. We'd never hugged in 23 years. We need to talk about what you're doing to my brother. Hello, Pamela. I didn't hear you knock. The door was unlocked. Douglas let me in. Douglas doesn't live here anymore. That's ridiculous. This is his house. Actually, it's not. But I'm sure he'll explain the prenuptial agreement to you. He was so proud of it when we signed it. She sat down on my couch without being invited, crossed her legs, arranged her face into what she probably thought was a sympathetic expression. Brenda, I know you're upset. Finding out about your little inheritance and thinking it makes you special, I understand how that could go to someone's head. But this lawsuit, these accusations, you're destroying a good man. A good man. I repeated the words like I was tasting them. They were bitter. Douglas has his flaws. I won't pretend otherwise. But he's been a good husband to you. He's supported you for over 2 decades. He gave me an allowance of $200 a month, Pamela. $200. I had to ask permission to buy groceries. I wore thrift store clothes because he controlled every penny. How exactly is that support? He provided you with a home, a lifestyle, security. He provided me with a cage. I built my own security. She waved her hand dismissively. This company you claim to own, I've looked into it. It's nothing. A little delivery business. Douglas says you're exaggerating its value to spite him. Fresh Start meal kits did $340 million in revenue last year. We operate in 12 states. We employ over 400 people. Forbes valued us at $120 million 6 months ago. I smiled. But sure, I'm exaggerating. Her expression flickered, just for a moment. Then the mask was back. Even if that's true, you built it during your marriage. Douglas is entitled to half. Read the prenup. The prenup protects his assets. It protects assets acquired through individual effort. My company was founded with inheritance money that never touched our joint accounts. I never used a single marital dollar. Every penny of profit was reinvested or placed in my own accounts. Douglas has no legal claim to any of it. I stood, walked to the window. But you know what's interesting, Pamela? While you're here defending Douglas's right to my money, I've been doing some digging into the family finances. Her face went carefully blank. I don't know what you mean. I mean the transfers. The monthly transfers from our joint account to an account in your name. They've been happening for 12 years, sometimes $500, sometimes $2,000. Douglas said it was for family emergencies. But when I looked at the statements, the money went out on the same day every month, like clockwork. Douglas helps me out sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. He helps you out with my money. Money that should have been jointly controlled but was apparently being redirected without my knowledge or consent. I turned to face her. Total amount over 12 years, $184,000. Her perfectly manicured hands gripped her purse. I've spoken to my lawyer, I continued. She believes I have a strong case for recovering those funds. From you, Pamela. Not from Douglas. From you personally. You can't. That's not. I can. I will. Unless you'd like to reconsider your position in this divorce. She stood up so fast her purse fell. This is blackmail. No, this is consequence. You and Douglas have been treating me like an ATM for 12 years. You both assumed I was too stupid to notice. But I noticed everything, Pamela. Every restaurant charge, every jewelry purchase, every vacation you took while I was delivering meal kits in my old van. Douglas said you were happy doing that. He said it gave you purpose. Douglas said a lot of things that weren't true. That's what pathological liars do. She retrieved her purse, drew herself up to her full height, which wasn't much. You're going to regret this, Brenda. Douglas has powerful friends, important connections. They're not going to let you destroy him. Douglas's powerful friends are already distancing themselves. Haven't you noticed? The gala was 5 days ago. He's been calling everyone he knows looking for support. No one's returning his calls. I walked to the front door, opened it. You should go now and take this message back to your brother. The story runs on Sunday. He has until Friday to settle. After that, nothing can stop it. What story? He'll know. She stared at me for a long moment, trying to read something in my face. Whatever she found there made her flinch. You've changed, she said. You're not the woman Douglas married. I'm the woman Douglas should have been afraid of. She left. I closed the door, leaned against it, let out a breath I'd been holding for what felt like hours. My phone rang. Thomas. Pamela just left, I said. I know. I have security watching the house. You didn't tell me that. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable, but Douglas has been making some concerning calls to people who do concerning work. You think he'd hurt me? I think a cornered man is a dangerous man, and Douglas is very much cornered. I thought about the Douglas I'd known for 23 years. The one who smiled at charity galas and played golf with clients and kissed my forehead before bed. That Douglas had never seemed capable of violence. But that Douglas was a character. A role he played. I had no idea what the real Douglas was capable of. What do you suggest? Move into the guest house at my estate, just until the divorce is final. I have round-the-clock security. You'd be safe there. If I leave this house, it looks like I'm running away. If you stay in this house, you might get hurt. I looked around the living room, the furniture Douglas had picked out, the artwork he'd chosen, the life we'd supposedly built together, which had really just been his life with me as a prop in the background. I'll think about it. Think quickly. The story runs in 4 days. Things are going to escalate before they get better. He hung up. I put down the phone. Walked upstairs to the master bedroom, the room I hadn't slept in for 3 years. Not since Douglas's snoring and complaints had driven me to the guest room. Not that he'd noticed or cared. His things were still there. His clothes in the closet, his toiletries in the bathroom, his side of the bed, still unmade from the last time he'd slept there. I'd been asking him to leave for almost a week. He'd been ignoring me, pretending this was all a misunderstanding that would blow over. I started packing his bags. It took 3 hours. I was methodical, careful. Suits organized by color, shoes in their original boxes. The Rolex he'd bought himself for our 20th anniversary. With my money, I now realized, wrapped in a silk pocket square. When I was done, there were 4 suitcases lined up by the door. I took a photo, sent it to Lillian, evidence that I've requested he leave, repeatedly. Good. If he refuses again, we can seek a temporary restraining order. Douglas came home at 7 p.m. He'd been at his sister's house all day, presumably strategizing. When he saw the suitcases, his face went red. What the hell is this? Your belongings. You need to leave. I'm not going anywhere. This is my house. We've been over this. It's not. The deed is in my name. The mortgage is paid from my accounts. You have no legal right to be here, and I'm asking you to leave. Asking? You're kicking me out like some kind of what, Douglas? A criminal? A predator? What's the word you're looking for? He stopped. His eyes narrowed. Pamela told me about your threats. You think you can blackmail me with ancient history? It's not blackmail. It's journalism. The Tribune is running a story on Sunday about Morrison and Associates, about the cover-up, about the women who were paid to stay silent. I leaned against the wall. Your name features prominently. Those accusations were never proven, because you paid to make them go away. But Rachel Torres doesn't care about the money anymore. She cares about justice. And so do the other 2 women who have agreed to go on record. His face went pale. What other women? Did you think there were only 3, Douglas? Did you think Michelle was the only one who couldn't live with what you did to her? The name hit him like a physical blow. I saw it in the way he flinched, the way his hand went to the wall for support. Michelle died because she was unstable. That had nothing to do with me. Michelle died because you raped her at a company retreat in 2011, and then Morrison promoted you while making her sign an NDA that included a psych evaluation designed to discredit her. She left a note, Douglas, naming you. Her family has a copy. The journalist has a copy. By Sunday, everyone will have a copy. You're lying. You're making this up to destroy me. Why would I need to make anything up? Your actual life is destruction enough. He moved toward me, fast, angry. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. For a moment, I almost wanted him to. It would make everything easier. But he stopped. His hands shook at his sides. If that story runs, I'm finished. Yes. Everything I've built, my reputation, my connections, all of it, gone. Yes. And you're just going to let that happen? After 23 years of marriage? You're going to destroy me without a second thought? I looked at him, really looked at him, searched for something, regret, remorse, recognition of what he'd done, found nothing but self-pity. You destroyed those women without a second thought. You destroyed Michelle without a second thought. You've been destroying me for 23 years, one small humiliation at a time, and you never once felt guilty about it. I pointed to the suitcases. Take your things. Leave. The security code will be changed in the morning. Where am I supposed to go? Pamela's house. A hotel. I don't care, but you're not staying here. He stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, processing. Then, slowly, he picked up the suitcases, carried them to the door. turned back. "This isn't over, Brenda. For you?" "I think it is." He left. I listened to his car start, the engine fade down the street. Then I walked through the house, checking locks, closing blinds, making sure I was alone. My phone buzzed. "Antoine. Did he leave?" "Yes." "How do you feel?" I thought about it, about the numbness spreading through my chest, about the strange, hollow victory of finally being rid of him, about the fear that was starting to creep in around the edges, now that the adrenaline was fading. "I feel like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff," I said, "and I just jumped." "Then spread your wings, mon ami. You're going to fly." I hung up, went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, sat at the table where I'd eaten thousands of meals across from a man I'd never really known. 4 days until the story ran. 4 days until Douglas's world collapsed completely. 4 days until everyone knew what kind of monster I'd been married to. I drank my wine, watched the night settle over the neighborhood, and I waited. Whatever came next, I was ready. The private investigator's name was Martin Cole, ex-FBI. 22 years of experience. He charged $400 an hour, and he was worth every penny. "I found some things," he said, spreading documents across my dining room table. Things that changed the calculus considerably. It was Thursday, 2 days before the Tribune story would run. Douglas had been staying at a hotel downtown, calling me 12 times a day, leaving voicemails that alternated between pleading and threatening. I'd stopped listening after the third one. "Show me," I said. Martin slid a photograph across the table. A man and a woman at a restaurant. The man was Douglas. The woman was younger, maybe 30, dark hair, expensive dress. "Taken 2 weeks ago. Her name is Veronica Lane. She works at Meridian Capital, the investment firm Douglas has been pitching." He's having an affair. That's not exactly news. But this is. He slid another document. Bank statements. Douglas has been receiving payments from Meridian Capital for the past 18 months. Not salary. He doesn't work there. These are payments for consulting services. Total amount, $230,000. I looked at the numbers. What kind of consulting? That's where it gets interesting. Another document. Emails printed out, highlighted in yellow. Your company, Fresh Start Meal Kits, has been in talks with Meridian about potential investment, preliminary discussions, nothing finalized. But Meridian has been very aggressive about getting inside information on your operations. The pieces started clicking together. Douglas was selling them information about my company. Not directly. He doesn't have access to your systems or your files. But he's been providing what he could. Overhead conversations, documents left on shared computers, details about your delivery routes, your supplier contracts, your expansion plans. Martin paused. He didn't know you owned Fresh Start. He thought he was just passing along information about some random meal kit company. But Meridian knew. They've known for months. How? Veronica Lane. She's not just Douglas's affair partner, she's the one who approached him in the first place. She was assigned to get close to him, extract information, and report back to her superiors. Douglas thought he was playing them. He was the one being played. I sat back. Let the information settle. My husband had been conducting corporate espionage against my own company without knowing it was my company. There was something almost poetic about it. Can we prove this? Already documented. Time-stamped emails, bank transfers, security footage of their meetings. Meridian covered their tracks well, but not well enough. Martin pulled out one more folder. There's also this. Inside, documents from Morrison and Associates. Not the harassment complaints. I'd already seen those. These were different. Financial records, internal memos, performance reviews. Douglas wasn't just terminated for harassment, Martin said. He was terminated because they discovered he'd been stealing from clients. Small amounts, hidden in fee structures that no one audited. Over 5 years, he took approximately $1.2 million. That's fraud. That's why the NDA was so aggressive. Morrison didn't just want to protect their reputation from the harassment claims. They wanted to bury the theft too. If it came out that one of their senior executives had been stealing from clients for years while the firm did nothing, they'd face lawsuits from every client he touched. I looked at the numbers again. $1.2 million, stolen over 5 years, while Morrison paid his victims to stay quiet about the assaults. Why wasn't he arrested? Because Morrison made it worth his while to leave quietly. The NDA covered everything, the harassment, the theft, all of it. In exchange, he walked away clean, no charges, no public record, just a large severance payment and a non-disparagement clause, which he violated when he told people he was fired due to restructuring. Technically, yes, but Morrison isn't going to enforce it. They have too much to lose if this goes to court. I stood, walked to the window, looked out at my backyard, the garden I'd planted, the patio I'd designed, the life I'd built around a man who was nothing but rot underneath. What about the espionage? Against my company? That's current. That's actionable. If you want to press charges, there's more than enough evidence. Corporate espionage, conspiracy, breach of fiduciary duty. Douglas would be looking at 5 to 10 years. And Meridian? They'd face massive fines, possibly criminal charges for their executives. They've been doing this to other companies too. Fresh Start isn't the only target. He paused. There's also a civil angle. You could sue them for damages. The amount would be substantial. I turned back. How substantial? 8 figures, easily. Your company's competitive advantage has been compromised. Trade secrets have been stolen. You have documented losses in potential contracts that went to competitors who happen to know your pricing models. I sat down, let it all sink in. Douglas hadn't just been cheating on me, lying to me, stealing from me. He'd been actively sabotaging my company. The company I'd built from nothing. The company that was going to be my freedom. He didn't know it was my company, I said slowly. He thought he was just making extra money on the side. Does that matter? No. I shook my head. No, it doesn't. The damage is the same, regardless of intent. Antoine called that afternoon. I told him what Martin had found. The line went quiet for a long moment. Mon Dieu, he finally said. The man is worse than we thought. He's worse than anyone thought. Except maybe his victims. What are you going to do? Everything. I'm going to do everything. I called Lillian, told her about the corporate espionage. She was quiet for a moment, then laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. He's been spying on his own wife's company without knowing it was his wife's company. This is almost too perfect. Can we use it? We can use all of it. The espionage charges alone would destroy any claim he has to marital assets. You can't profit from a crime. If he's been committing crimes against your company, any argument he had for community property goes out the window. And the criminal charges? That's your decision. Filing would make everything public immediately. It would accelerate the timeline on everything else. The Tribune story, the harassment revelations, all of it. Do it, I said. File everything. I want it all out there. Are you sure? Once we start this, there's no going back. I thought about Michelle, 23 years old, dead by her own hand because a man destroyed her and the company protected him. I thought about Rachel, living with the trauma for 16 years, finally ready to speak. I thought about all the women Douglas had hurt, all the clients he'd stolen from, all the lives he'd damaged while smiling for photos at charity galas. I'm sure. Lillian filed the complaints the next morning. Corporate espionage, fraud, conspiracy. The FBI was notified. So was the SEC, because some of the stolen information related to publicly traded companies that Meridian had used for insider trading. By noon, Douglas was at my door. What have you done? His face was red, veins bulging in his temples. The FBI is at my hotel. They're seizing my computers, my phones. That's what happens when you commit federal crimes, Douglas. I didn't commit any crimes. I was consulting, that's all. I provided market research. You provided insider information about competitor companies, including mine. You sold my trade secrets to Meridian Capital for $230,000 over 18 months. He froze. Your what? Fresh Start Meal Kits. My company. The one you've been mocking for years. The one you called an embarrassment to our image. You've been stealing information from it and selling it to our competitors. I didn't know. That doesn't matter. The crime is the same whether you knew or not. He grabbed my arm. Tight. Too tight. You have to drop the charges. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them. I looked down at his hand, at the fingers digging into my skin. Take your hand off me. Brenda, please. I'm begging you. If these charges stick, I'm going to prison. Good. You can't mean that. After everything we've been through. I pulled my arm free, stepped back. Everything we've been through? You mean the 23 years you spent lying to me, stealing from me, cheating on me? You mean the women you assaulted while I made your dinner and washed your clothes? You mean the girl who killed herself because you raped her and no one believed her? I stepped forward, close enough that he could see the fury in my eyes. You're right. After everything we've been through, I can't wait to watch you rot in a cell. You're crazy. You've lost your mind. I've found my mind. For the first time in 23 years, I'm seeing clearly. Security arrived then. Thomas's men, the ones who'd been watching the house. 2 of them, large and calm, positioning themselves between me and Douglas. Collins, you need to leave, one of them said. This is my wife. We're having a conversation. This is a restraining order. Lillian appeared behind them, holding a document. Signed by Judge Morrison this morning. You're required to stay 500 feet away from Ms. Collins at all times. If you approach her again, you'll be arrested. Douglas looked at the paper, at the men, at me. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. It was over the moment you decided to laugh at me in front of Thomas Whitfield. The moment you called me an embarrassment. The moment you showed everyone exactly who you are. I turned my back on him. Goodbye, Douglas. He left. The security men escorted him to his car, watched him drive away. Lillian came inside, set her briefcase on the table. The Tribune story has been moved up. It runs tomorrow instead of Sunday. Why? Because other outlets are picking up the FBI angle. The arrest warrant. The espionage charges. If the Tribune wants to break the harassment story, they need to do it now, before it gets buried under the criminal investigation. What about Rachel? Is she ready? She's ready. So are the others. They're going on record. Names, dates, details, everything. Lillian paused. There's also been a development with the Morrison documents. The family of Michelle Chen has agreed to release her suicide note to the press. I closed my eyes. Michelle. Finally, her story would be told. Finally, people would know what Douglas had done to her. The note names Douglas specifically. Lillian continued. It describes the assault in detail. It talks about the NDA, the psych evaluation, the way Morrison pressured her to recant. It's brutal, but it's the truth. And Douglas? He's been advised not to leave the state. The FBI has frozen his accounts. His passport's been flagged. By this time tomorrow, he won't be able to buy a cup of coffee. I sat down. Let it all wash over me. The exhaustion, the grief, the terrible, hollow satisfaction of watching a monster finally face justice. Is this really happening? I asked. It's really happening. After everything, all the years, all the lies, it's actually over? Lillian sat across from me. Her expression softened, just for a moment. The hardest part is over. The waiting is over. Now comes the reconstruction, building a life without him. That's the work that remains. I nodded, looked around the house that would soon be legally, officially, permanently mine. The house where I'd spent 23 years invisible. The house where I'd planned my escape, night after night, while Douglas slept in the next room. I'm ready, I said. I've been ready for a long time. The story broke at midnight. By dawn, Douglas Collins was the most hated man in Chicago. The Tribune headline read, Chicago executive accused of serial assault, corporate espionage, and driving victim to suicide. Below it, a photo of Douglas from the gala, smiling, holding a glass of wine. The same night he'd called me an embarrassment. By 8 a.m., the story had been picked up by CNN, NBC, The New York Times. By noon, it was trending on every social media platform. By evening, there were protesters outside Douglas's hotel, holding signs with Michelle Chen's name and photograph. Rachel Torres gave her first interview that morning. She sat in a studio, composed and clear-eyed, and told the world what Douglas had done to her 16 years ago. She named names. She showed documents. She read excerpts from the NDA that Morrison had forced her to sign. "They asked me what I was wearing," she said, her voice steady. "They asked if I'd been drinking. They asked if maybe I'd sent the wrong signals. And then they gave me 6 months' salary and told me to go away. That's what justice looked like for women like me in 2008. Two other women came forward that afternoon. Sandra Liu, now 45, who'd been an analyst at Morrison when Douglas cornered her in a conference room, and Tanya Williams, 39, who'd been an intern, 19 years old, when he'd followed her to the parking garage. "I thought it was my fault," Tanya said on camera. "I was young. He was important. Everyone told me I was lucky to have his attention. When it happened, I didn't even have words for what he'd done. I just knew I felt wrong, dirty, like I'd never be clean again." I watched the interviews from Thomas's guest house, where I'd finally agreed to stay after Lillian showed me the threats Douglas had been posting on anonymous forums. Death threats, detailed descriptions of what he wanted to do to me. The FBI was investigating those too. Thomas brought me tea, sat beside me on the couch as the coverage continued. "How do you feel?" he asked. "I don't know. Numb, mostly. Like I'm watching something that's happening to someone else. That's normal. It's how the brain protects itself." I looked at him. This man I'd only known for 10 years. This father I'd found when I thought I had no one. "Thank you. For everything. For believing me when I showed up at your door with nothing but a DNA test. For giving me a kitchen to work in. For being here now. You're my daughter." "There's nothing to thank. You didn't have to acknowledge me. You could have denied it, paid me off, made me go away. I could have." He set down his cup, "But I knew the moment I saw you that you were mine. You had your mother's eyes, her stubbornness, her ability to walk into a room and make people underestimate you. I spent the first 5 minutes of our meeting watching you and thinking, this woman is going to change the world, and no one else can see it but me." I felt tears prick my eyes, push them back. "She never told me about you," I said. "My mother. She kept it secret until she died. I know why she did it. I was married when we met, 25 years old, full of ambition, already building the company that would make me rich. She was a waitress at a diner near my office. We had an affair. When she got pregnant, I told her I couldn't leave my wife. My family's money was tied up in trusts that required me to stay married until I was 30. He paused. I offered to help, financially. She refused. She said she didn't want her daughter growing up thinking she was a transaction. But she kept the letter, the one I found. She kept it because somewhere, part of her wanted you to know. She just couldn't bring herself to tell you while she was alive." He looked at me. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. For all those years. I'm sorry I let fear of my family's judgment keep me from being your father. You're here now. That's what matters." My phone buzzed. "Lillian, the FBI wants to interview you tomorrow about the corporate espionage. They have questions about what information Douglas might have accessed." "I'll be there." Also, Douglas's lawyer called. Gerald Finch has withdrawn from the case. Conflict of interest. Apparently Finch did some work for Meridian 5 years ago. Douglas is now representing himself in a federal criminal case. He thinks he can talk his way out of it, charm the prosecutors the way he charmed everyone else. She paused. "It won't work." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through Thomas's estate, past the pool, past the gardens, to the small test kitchen where I'd developed my first recipes 10 years ago. It was still there, unchanged. The same industrial stove, the same stainless steel counters, the same window overlooking the rose garden. I made cookies, chocolate chip. The first recipe I'd ever perfected. Simple ingredients, precise measurements, a process I could follow without thinking. The smell of butter and sugar filled the kitchen, and for a moment I was someone else. Not the woman whose husband had been exposed as a monster. Just a woman making cookies at midnight because it was the only thing that made sense. Chef Antoine found me there at 2 a.m. He had a key to the estate. Thomas had given him one years ago. "Lillian called me," he said. She said you weren't answering your phone. I turned it off. Too many notifications. He sat on a stool, watching me pull the last batch from the oven. How are you really? I don't know how to feel. I should feel victorious. He's finally facing consequences. The women he hurt are finally being heard. But all I feel is... I searched for the word. Empty. That's grief. You're mourning the life you thought you had. I hated that life. You hated parts of it, but there were other parts. The routines, the familiarity, the identity of being someone's wife that were real, even if they were built on lies. Losing those things is still loss. I set the cookies on a cooling rack, stared at them without seeing them. I loved him once. When we first met, I really loved him. He was charming and confident, and he made me feel like I mattered. How could I have been so wrong about someone? You weren't wrong. You saw what he showed you, what he wanted you to see. The deception is his failure, not yours. But I should have noticed. The signs were there. The controlling behavior, the manipulation, the way he made me feel small whenever I tried to be big. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages had problems, that I should be grateful he stayed. And now? I looked at Antoine, this man who had been my partner and friend for 8 years, who had never once made me feel like less than I was, who had celebrated my successes and supported my failures and stood beside me when everything fell apart. Now I know what I deserve. I deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be valued for who I am, not who someone else wants me to be. I picked up a cookie, bit into it. Perfectly soft in the middle. I deserve to eat chocolate chip cookies at 2 a.m. without apologizing for it. Then this has all been worth it. Has it? 4 women were assaulted. One of them killed herself. Millions of dollars were stolen. Lives were destroyed. And the only reason any of it is coming out is because Douglas happened to humiliate me in front of the right person at the right time. Justice delayed is still justice. Is it? Or is it just revenge dressed up in better clothes? Antoine was quiet for a moment. Then, Michelle Chen's sister called the office today. She wanted to thank you. She said for 15 years no one believed her family. No one cared. She said watching Douglas get arrested was the first moment she'd felt hope since Michelle died. I closed my eyes. Michelle. 19 years old when Douglas attacked her. 23 when she couldn't live with it anymore. Her whole life reduced to a statistic, a settlement, a sealed document. I'm going to set up a foundation, I said, in Michelle's name, for survivors of workplace assault. Legal aid, counseling, job placement after they leave companies that failed them. That would be fitting. And I want Rachel and Sandra and Tanya involved, not as tokens, as leaders. They know what survivors need because they are survivors. They'll say yes. I'm certain of it. The sun was starting to rise. Orange light through the kitchen window, painting the counters gold. I'd been awake for almost 24 hours. I should have been exhausted. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the hollow purpose Douglas had mocked. She says it gives her purpose, but real purpose. The kind that comes from knowing exactly what you want to do and having the power to do it. I should get ready for the FBI interview, I said. Eat something first. You can't overthrow the patriarchy on an empty stomach. I laughed. Actually laughed. The first real laugh in days. Stay for breakfast? I asked. I thought you'd never ask. We ate eggs and cookies and drank too much coffee while the news played in the background. More coverage of Douglas, more interviews with his victims, more analysis from legal experts predicting he'd spend the next 10 to 20 years in prison. At 9 a.m., Lillian called. Douglas tried to flee. He hired a private pilot to fly him to Mexico. The FBI stopped him at the airport. Is he in custody? He's in a holding cell at O'Hare. Bail has been revoked. He's being transferred to federal detention this afternoon. I thought about Douglas in a cell. No expensive suits, no charm to deploy, no victims to manipulate. Just concrete walls and fluorescent lights and the slow, grinding machinery of justice. Good, I said. Let him sit there. Let him think about what he's done. He's asking to speak with you. Through his attorney, He has a public defender now. He says he wants to apologize. He can apologize to a jury. That's what I told them. I hung up, looked at Antoine. It's almost over, I said. No. He shook his head. It's just beginning. The trial will take months. The civil suits will take years. The healing will take a lifetime. He put his hand on mine. But you won't be doing any of it alone. I squeezed his hand. Let myself feel, just for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened. Then I let it go. Let's go, I said. I have an FBI interview. And then I have a company to run. We walked out into the morning light. Behind us, the cookies I'd made sat cooling on the rack. Simple ingredients, precise measurements, a process I could follow without thinking. Like everything else in my life, they'd turned out exactly as I'd planned. The trial lasted 4 months. Douglas was charged with 12 counts of corporate espionage, 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of insider trading, and 1 count of attempted flight. The harassment and assault charges were handled separately by the state, with 5 women testifying against him in proceedings that made national news. I testified twice, once for the federal case, about the information he'd stolen from my company, once for the state case, as a character witness who could speak to his pattern of deception and control. Both times, I sat in the witness box and looked at the man I'd been married to for 23 years, and I felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of watching karma work. The federal jury convicted him on all counts, 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The state trial resulted in 3 convictions for sexual assault and 1 for attempted rape. 22 years, to be served consecutively after the federal sentence. Douglas would be 93 years old before he was eligible for parole, assuming he survived that long. Pamela was also charged, accessory after the fact, conspiracy to commit fraud. She'd known about Douglas's theft from Morrison and helped him hide the money. She pleaded guilty to avoid trial and received 18 months in federal prison plus restitution of $184,000 to me personally. The house she'd bought with my stolen money was sold at auction. I didn't bid on it. Some things aren't worth keeping. Morrison and Associates faced a class action lawsuit from clients whose accounts had been plundered. The firm settled for $47 million and ceased operations 6 months later. The partners scattered. The building where Douglas had worked was converted into condos. Meridian Capital paid $120 million in fines and damages for the espionage scheme. 3 executives went to prison. Veronica Lane, Douglas's handler, cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. She served 2 years and now works at a nonprofit. I don't know if she's changed. I don't particularly care. I used part of my settlement to establish the Michelle Chen Foundation, as I'd promised. Rachel Torres became the executive director. Sandra Liu joined the board. Tanya Williams started a speakers bureau, traveling to companies and universities to talk about workplace assault and the importance of believing survivors. In the first year, the foundation helped 347 women pursue legal action against their abusers. In the second year, that number doubled. By the third year, we'd expanded to 5 states and were lobbying Congress for stronger protections for workplace assault victims. Fresh Start meal kits went public 18 months after the gala. The IPO valued the company at $890 million. I retained 52% ownership and a seat on the board. Thomas held another 15%. Antoine held 8%. The rest was distributed among early employees and investors who'd believed in us when we were just a woman with a recipe and a dream. I still drive the van sometimes. Not every day, not even every week. But when things get overwhelming, when the board meetings drag on, or the media requests pile up, or I just need to remember why I started all this, I put on my delivery uniform, climb into my old Ford Transit, and spend a morning dropping off meal kits to customers who have no idea their CEO is ringing their doorbell. It keeps me grounded. Reminds me that the company isn't about numbers or valuations or press coverage. It's about a box of fresh ingredients showing up when someone needs it. It's about making something hard, feeding a family, a little bit easier. Thomas turned 72 last month. We celebrated at his estate, just the two of us, eating the cookies I'd made in his test kitchen all those years ago. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You say that a lot, because it's true a lot." He set down his glass. "You know, when you first came to me, I thought you wanted what everyone wants from me. Money, connections, a shortcut to success. But you just asked for a kitchen, a place to work, a chance to prove yourself. I didn't want your money. I wanted to earn my own. I know. That's why I gave you the kitchen. That's why I watched. That's why I waited." He smiled. "And that's why I was at the gala that night. Because I knew, sooner or later, you'd be ready to stop hiding. I wanted to be there when it happened. You planned it? The whole thing? Not planned? Anticipated? I didn't know Douglas would humiliate you publicly, but I knew you were close to breaking. I knew something was going to happen, and I wanted to be there to catch you when it did. I thought about that night, about Douglas's laugh, about the moment Thomas's phone rang, about the whisper that changed everything. What did you say to him? When you leaned in?" Thomas's smile widened. I said, "You just called my daughter an embarrassment. My daughter who could buy and sell you 10 times over. You might want to start running." I laughed. The same laugh I'd been rediscovering over the past 2 years. Freer, lighter, like it belonged to someone who had finally forgiven herself. He didn't run far enough. He didn't. The anniversary of the gala came and went. Then another. Then another. Life settled into something I hadn't known was possible. Normalcy. I moved into a penthouse downtown with views of Lake Michigan. Decorated it myself, with colors I liked and furniture I chose, without asking anyone's permission or worrying about anyone's disapproval. I hired a housekeeper and a personal assistant and a chef who came 3 times a week to prepare meals that I actually enjoyed eating. I started dating again, carefully, slowly. A few dinners with a venture capitalist who made me laugh. A weekend getaway with a professor who quoted poetry and didn't check his phone at the table. Nothing serious, nothing permanent. Just the strange, wonderful experience of being seen for who I was instead of who someone else wanted me to be. Antoine got engaged to a woman named Claire who ran a pastry shop in Lincoln Park. They asked me to officiate the wedding. I got ordained online and performed the ceremony in Thomas's rose garden, the same one visible from the test kitchen window. It was the happiest day I could remember. Rachel Torres called me on the 3rd anniversary of the Tribune story. She was in her car, parked outside a courthouse in downtown Chicago. "They're releasing him," she said. "Who?" "Douglas, early release, good behavior. He served 7 years of his federal sentence. The state charges were reduced on appeal, something about prosecutorial misconduct. He's getting out." I felt the ground shift beneath me, the careful equilibrium I'd built over 3 years, suddenly tilting. When? Tomorrow. I hung up, sat in my office, looked out at the lake, at the boats cutting white lines through blue water, at the world continuing on as if nothing had changed. Douglas was getting out. The man who had stolen my identity, who had assaulted women, who had driven a girl to suicide, who had tried to destroy my company and my life. He was going to walk free. I called Thomas. Told him what Rachel had told me. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "No." And I realized, saying it, that it was true. He can't hurt me anymore. He has no money, no connections, no power. He's just a man now. A pathetic, ruined man who spent 7 years in prison thinking about everything he lost. "Then why do you sound shaken?" "Because I thought I was done with him. I thought when they took him away, that was the end of the story. But it's not. He's still out there. Still breathing, still existing in a world where I exist too. That's going to be true whether he's in prison or not. The question is, does it change anything?" I thought about it, about my company, my foundation, my life, about the woman I'd become since that night at the gala, about everything I'd built and everything I'd proven. "No," I said finally. "It doesn't change anything." "Then let him go. Let him fade into obscurity. Let him live the rest of his miserable life knowing that you won and he lost. That's a punishment worse than any prison." Douglas was released the next day. There were no cameras, no protesters. Just a man in an ill-fitting suit walking out of a facility in rural Illinois, squinting at the sunlight like he'd forgotten what it looked like. I know this because I was there. Not to confront him. Not to gloat, just to see. To watch the monster step out of his cage and realize that the world had moved on without him. He saw me, standing by my car. Not the van, but a Tesla I'd bought myself for my 60th birthday. He stopped, stared. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I smiled, raised my hand in a small wave, got in my car and drove away. I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I was at another gala. Different hotel, different cause. Same glittering crowd of wealthy people pretending to care about things they barely understood. But this time, I wasn't invisible. This time, I was the guest of honor. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "please welcome our keynote speaker and the recipient of this year's Women in Business Leadership Award, Brenda Collins." I walked to the podium, looked out at the faces looking back at me. Some I recognized. The Hendersons, still together, pretending they'd never witnessed Douglas's downfall. The Martins, divorced now, seated at opposite ends of the room. People who had smiled at me for 2 decades while thinking I was nothing. "Thank you," I said. 5 years ago, I stood in a room very much like this one. My husband was making important people laugh. I was holding a glass of champagne I wasn't drinking, wearing a dress I'd bought at a thrift store, wondering if anyone would notice if I left. I paused, let the silence settle. That night, my husband told an investor that I was an embarrassment, that I drove an old van and delivered meal kits and had nothing to contribute to polite society. I smiled. What he didn't know was that the meal kits I delivered were from my company, a company I'd built in secret while he wasn't paying attention, a company worth more than everything he'd ever owned or ever would. Light laughter from the audience. They'd heard this story. Everyone had heard this story. But they still wanted to hear it again. I learned something that night. Something I wish I'd learned decades earlier. The people who try to make you invisible are afraid of what you might do if you were seen. They don't diminish you because you're worthless. They diminish you because they know, on some level, that you're a threat. I looked around the room, at the women in expensive gowns, many of them married to men who underestimated them, at the younger women in business suits, trying to climb ladders that kept getting taller, at all of us, fighting the same fight in different arenas. So my message to you tonight is simple. Let them underestimate you. Let them laugh. Let them call you an embarrassment, a joke, a waste of potential. And while they're busy dismissing you, build something they can't ignore. Build something that will outlast them. Build something that proves, once and for all, that you were never invisible. You were just biding your time. I raised my glass. To the women they didn't see coming. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Flashbulbs. The kind of attention I'd spent 58 years avoiding and 3 years embracing. Later, after the speeches and the handshakes and the business cards exchanged, I slipped away to the parking garage, found my Tesla, leaned against it and breathed. A valet approached. Young kid, maybe 20. He looked at me, then at the car, then at me again. "You're Brenda Collins," he said. "The meal kit lady." I laughed. "That's me. My mom uses your service. She says it's the only way she can get dinner on the table since she started working 2 jobs. He paused. I just wanted to say thanks for making her life a little easier. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a business card, handed it to him. "If you ever want to deliver meal kits in an old van, give me a call. We're always looking for good people." He stared at the card like I'd handed him gold. "Are you serious?" "Completely. It's how I started. Could be how you start too." I got in the car, started the engine, drove out of the garage into the Chicago night. The city glittered around me. Millions of people living millions of lives. Some of them happy, some of them trapped. Some of them like me, somewhere in between. I thought about Douglas, wherever he was tonight, alone, forgotten, living in the ruins of everything he'd tried to build. I thought about Michelle Chen, who never got to see justice served, whose name now graced a foundation that had helped thousands. I thought about Rachel and Sandra and Tanya, warriors who had turned their pain into purpose. And I thought about myself, 60 years old, divorced, childless by circumstance, surrounded by family by choice, CEO of a company worth nearly $1 billion, founder of a foundation that changed lives, daughter, finally, of a father who saw me, not invisible anymore, never invisible again. I drove home through streets I'd driven 1,000 times before, past the hotel where everything had changed, past the courthouse where Douglas had been convicted, past the building where my van was parked, waiting for the next time I needed to remember who I was. The penthouse was quiet when I arrived. I poured myself a glass of wine, stood by the window, looked out at the lake and the lights and the endless possibility of the night. My phone buzzed. A text from Antoine. "Congratulations on the award. You deserve it. A." I smiled, set down the phone, raised my glass to my reflection in the window. "To the woman in the old van," I said, "who turned out to be so much more." I drank the wine, watched the lights of the city, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever came next, I was ready. I had always been ready. I just hadn't known it until someone tried to tear me down. And that, perhaps, was the greatest revenge of all.